And we are recording. Mayor Jacobs.
I'm here.
Committeeman Hickey.
Here.
Mr. Stratcott.
Here.
Mr. Travelini, not yet. Mr. Odelius.
Here.
Mr. Leonard.
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni, not yet. Mr. Zupnik.
Present.
Ms. Urbana.
Here.
He's there. He's up on stage.
There he is, Tim, yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear anything. Sorry, I'm here.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Here.
And Mr. Travelini, I do believe, signed on. Down there whether he has audio or not. I do not know. Yeah, but he's connecting now. So just Lou is absent at this point.
Okay.
The notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Burgersville News and the Courier News, and to all subscribers, and is posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 16, 2020.
Okay. Want to try the flag salute tonight?
I pledge allegiance
To the
To the
flag
flag
of the United
States of America,
to the republic
Republic
for which
which it stands,
one
one
nation
nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
liberty,
liberty.
and justice for all.
Not bad.
Not too bad.
Oh,
Little
choreographed,
improvement.
right? Yeah.
Another couple years, we'll get there. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public if they have anything that they would like to discuss that's not on the agenda. See anybody, Janine?
I am looking now. You can either raise your hand, or if you're on your phone, you can hit *9. Anyone from the public with a hand raised?
Okay, then we will close it to the public. We have the minutes from November 12th that need to be approved. Everybody's had a chance to look at them. Could I have a motion?
So moved. Scott.
Second, George.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Think everybody's eligible? Okay, motion's approved. We also have a resolution for the Pluck 'em in resolution. You've had a chance to look at that. We
Motion
need
to
a
approve.
motion. Okay,
Second.
second by Nick. Okay, we need a roll call.
Mayor Jacobs.
Aye.
Committeeman Hickey.
Aye.
Mr. Stratcott.
Aye.
Mr. Travelini.
You got to unmute it, Rich.
We have,
Nay.
thank you. George, nay.
Can't hear you, Janine.
We're not hearing you, Janine.
Rich, were you yes or no?
Nay.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Cornelius,
Aye.
Mr. DiGiovanni is absent. Mr. Zupnik,
Aye.
Ms. Urbana.
Jean, I'm abstaining. I don't think I can vote on this. I wasn't at that meeting.
Thank you.
Then you'd be abstaining. Mhm.
Mr. Wa-
Me, I wasn't there either.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Yes. Motion has approved for Pluck 'em in resolution. Okay, we'll go to 20 Route 206 LLC. This is a new application. Paul?
Okay, Madam Chairman, I'm sorry.
That's
Just
okay.
had to unmute it the old way. I wrote a letter that frankly, I just remembered I hadn't sent out to the board and did it a few minutes before the meeting. This is the application for what has been known as the Bedminster 2 site. I wrote a completed review. It has a date of December 10th, 2020. There are a couple of items for which waivers are being requested. They are the county planning board approval, for example, and DEP approvals, which are typically conditions of approvals. There is one item where they're talking about the regional significance of the project and the proof of the service. That I have to finally resolve before they get the hearing, because this is directly adjacent to the Bridgewater border. So we may have to deal with that as it relates to their notice before they have their hearing. But other than that, with the minor waivers identified, it's recommended that the application be deemed complete.
Well, what's your comment? The application form is not consistent with the OR1 zoning requirements?
It's that because we have the overlay there for the suites, you know, it really does not amount to much, because the zone standards are a little different than the OR1.
Okay.
Okay, so you're recommending it be deemed complete.
Yes.
Okay, so we need a motion.
I'll
So
motion.
moved. Seconded.
Second.
Did you have that, Janine?
Jeff and Scott.
Okay, all right, roll call, please.
Mayor Jacobs,
Aye.
Councilman Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Strackoff,
Aye.
Mr. Travellini,
Aye.
Mr. Rodelius,
Aye.
Mr. Leonard,
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik,
Aye.
Ms. Arabana,
Aye.
Mr. Walter,
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall.
Aye, motion is complete. Okay, we're going to discuss, I guess we can go into our master plan discussion. And who's going to lead that? Tom, is that in your department?
I think
Okay.
so, Madam Chairman, yes. So after the last meeting, we have communicated with NOAA and KRE and their professionals. And I believe tonight that, as a result of those communications, we know of some details they'd like to present to you. And we can listen to those and give them our feedback. And I think if you want to, you could turn it over to Noah and his team.
Okay, very good. Noah, good evening, and we welcome you back.
Good evening, Carol. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. So I think that from the last meeting, first of all, thank you for having us again. From the last meeting, we just had a few items to cover that came up. Number one was, and I'm kind of going to go in reverse order here, that I think there were a couple comments that people wanted to zoom out and let's look at the whole site here, not forgetting about the improvements that are going to be made to bed 1.
Right.
Number two, I think largely in response to some of Rich's comments, but also others on the board, wanted to detail a little bit more some of the breaks in the buildings and some of the light and air and the way that we're thinking of building up breaking up the mass of the apartment building.
All right.
And number three, also wanted to address something that's just germinating for us right now, but came in a response to some comments that the mayor was nice enough to share with us about maybe a more substantial connection to Pluckerman Park. And so we just want to talk through that a little bit now, not sure exactly how that would be fit into master plan or a zoning ordinance, but certainly I think some intent could be shared there. And I think we've got some ideas that we'd like to run through. So I think what Mark thought also would be helpful is, since we're stepping back and looking at the whole site, we're going to do the whole presentation tonight, but we're going to whip through the slides that you've already seen. We just want to bring it back as we're sort of rounding back here to have the full deck, because I think that the last couple times we've simply provided an abridged version of this, just focusing on the new elements of it. So we have basically 3 new elements tonight, but we will go through the whole deck. And again, Mark will whip through those slides that you guys have already seen, unless you'd like us to stop somewhere.
Okay, I think that would be helpful, Noah. The subcommittee had seen things that the whole board hadn't seen. So I think that would be very helpful, Noah.
Fantastic. Okay,
Good.
so Mark, take it over. And Mark is having a little bit of let's say a professional crisis right now. He's trying to decide whether he wants to be an architect or an undercover private investigator or something, detective of some sort. So you'll notice his mustache there.
Wearing it well. Come on,
Forgive him
man.
that.
It's quarantine. I appreciate the support.
I was actually thinking Mario Brothers.
Smith Brothers, maybe, or maybe a pipe.
Get the criticism out now.
I don't think it was criticism.
The host
right.
just needs to let me share the screen. If the host could enable screen sharing. I don't know who the host is.
I think it's Janine, but
I think Janine.
It is Janine, and she's working at it.
Okay, good.
There she is.
Oh, there we go. Okay, super. So now I can share my screen. Great. Okay. Janine, I'm going to kick you off. I hope that's okay. Everyone can see the presentation?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. So like Noah said, I'm going to move relatively quickly. Just flag me if you want me to slow down.
That would be fine.
Great. Oops. Okay. So like Noah said, we're going to take a step back and look at the site in its entirety. And some things that we're definitely going to talk about tonight are this new connection that we want to emphasize to Pluckerman Park from our site. Really, what we realize is that if we do that right, we could have pedestrian traffic moving through our site and up through the intersection to Pluckerman Village and create a really great pedestrian experience. We're also going to look at enhancements that we'll make to the Bed 1 site and talk about the parking that we'll be enhancing there. We talked about the rich historical architectural tradition of Bedminster that we want to build on. And more locally, the shopping architecture of Pluckerman Village, which we know is a really rich experience. And some more contemporary examples of how architects have used those inspirations to build new contemporary buildings. And that our site really sits in between these two poles, the pole of the office complex at Bed 1 and Pluckerman Village, and we have a chance to sort of bridge the gap between the two. Paramount to us is to make a great shopping, pedestrian, retail experience, but also have enough availability for parking and retail activation. So trying to create a plaza that's commodious to both the pedestrian, the driver, and the resident. One of the tactics that we want to deploy is patterning and painting of the pavement to make it a seamless experience and encourage outdoor dining with outdoor furniture and make our lobby for the residents something public that can act as a cafe and sort of an interface between public and private. Committee member Hickey shared these images and we love these. These are exactly what we're thinking. This one from High Street in Atlanta, Georgia. Really great examples of retail and pedestrian plazas, places to hang out, enjoy some shopping, enjoy a meal, enjoy a drink. And then this picture, although this isn't Pete Gladstone, this was the picture he sent and we love this. Street dining, pergolas, and a really rich intersection of landscape and pedestrian activation. So we've been through these diagrams about how we'll do that in the plaza by using bollards, landscaping, and curbless definition of space to create a kind of, rather than a binary relationship between cars and pedestrians, a real traffic slowed, comfortable area for people to hang out in. And now let's look a little more closely at the residential. So you've seen all of that before, and you've seen this plan too. The building is basically oriented, here's Burnt Mills Road to the north on this site plan. Traffic comes in, turns, and moves through the site here, potentially moving in both directions. Once we get a little further, we'll work with a traffic engineer. Amenity and retail space faces that plaza, and the retail pavilion up on Burnt Mills Road to create a contextual scale. And I'm really just showing you this here because I wanted to flip to the next page to talk about how we're breaking up the mass. So this is a roof plan that can show you how we're dealing with, now you've seen the front plaza already and how that articulation includes things like a setback, this big sort of vertical piece within this arm of the building, and then distinct facades that break up what otherwise would have been a larger facade. There's that lobby element sitting in the middle, pulled back from the facade. And then again, the mass is broken up with distinct facades here, and then the final arm of the building. That we've been talking a lot about the pedestrian plaza. So Rich brought up the really good point of what are we planning for the rest of the building? And this should give you some idea. It's basically broken up into 3 courtyards, a large courtyard for parking and access to the residences, an amenity courtyard in the middle, and then a third smaller courtyard over here. Each one of these is crafted to make it feel like it's composed of smaller elements that aggregate into something bigger and more experiential. We like the idea of it being a square. We think that makes it feel sort of warm, like the building is hugging these spaces. But these longer facades are broken up by the exact same technique we're using in the plaza. So it should feel like the same place, just an iteration on a theme. So like for instance, a facade reveal set back, that's roughly 15 feet. And then the facade marches on until it hits a vertical element that breaks that facade and signals entryway. And then again, moves on. You can see these little things pointing out here are balconies. A facade reveal, the building marches on, broken again by a vertical element, and continues on. Our end caps are articulated the same way they are in the plaza. And then really a very similar technique here, where we reduce the scale of the building by introducing these intermittent elements. We're introducing a vocabulary of dormers on the front plaza, and we expect to do the same thing along the roof on some of these arms here. To give you an idea of just dimension, just to put some numbers to this, it really kind of starts to break down the building into smaller pieces. So like we've been looking at the front facade, here's a 75-foot run, and then this 21-foot vertical element that takes it out of the horizontal context and sort of makes it into, I mean, I don't want it to feel like a village. I want it to feel composed and like it's a single work, but that it's a work that sort of operates at the pedestrian scale. And that's what these pieces are meant to do. All of those moves are reinforced by the material strategy that we've introduced to date that all of you have seen, taking a sort of stripped classical or neoclassical approach to these building types. Here are some precedents that we love. And then applying them to each of these elements again. So you've seen all this. Let me pull here. Our fieldstone entryway lobby piece, that 75-foot wide entryway cafe. And then the zoom in of this activated pedestrian area. You can see here we sort of plopped people on chairs. Later on, we'll develop this to hopefully include a water feature, benches, like a really rich tapestry of space. Here we are looking at the right-hand wing, if you're looking straight onto the building from Burnt Mills, and you've seen these facades before. And I'm gonna flip through because we've gone ahead and cut sections through the building to start to address some of the concern about the building height. And then again, on the left-hand side of the overall composition, and here it is in its entirety. There was some concern about the building being 55 feet high in some places, and we wanted to walk through and show you how we're controlling the height and we think creating a contextual building. So the first thing to point out is that the building is only 55 feet here and here, if you can see my mouse. The rest of the building is 50 feet for the most part, and then tries to really step down to the pedestrian level in a series of gradations. So just to sort of set the scene, this is a site section through Burnt Mills Road. So here's Burnt Mills Road, which is about 45 feet wide, 50 feet wide. Here's an existing 2-story house, which was labeled by a British person in my office, so you'll excuse the E in story, but approximately 35 feet high, 30 feet high. Across the street from that, we meet that scale with our retail pavilion at about the same height, right at about 20 or 25 feet. So we're sort of creating that, that existing fabric height. And then within our 120-foot wide setback from Burnt Mills Road, we activate with placemaking lights, landscape, and we slowly build up to 50 feet, which is the typical building height that exists throughout the project. So you can see it sort of goes up and then again does the same thing. So now I want to just walk you through a series of sections. We're going to go from right to left.
And Mark, sorry, Mark, but before you get there, I think important to point out that before you hit the peak of that 55-foot roof, as folks can tell here just by sort of ballparking the dimension here, you're probably from Burnt Mills somewhere close to 175 feet back before you hit that peak from the road.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good distance. Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like we're looming over the street. It really steps back, and you'll see it as let me flip to the next page here. So we took a series of, I think, 4 sections through the site. So here we are cutting through what will be the gym or amenities section of the program. The retail pavilion is beyond this cut. So we're seeing, what will be the facade of the retail pavilion. Here's Burnt Mills Road, vehicular circulation, parking, outdoor seating, and then the gym with the arcade, the brick arcade. This is 15 feet. The parapet wall here would probably be at about 18.5 feet right here. So that's that relationship from here to here. The rest of the building bulk is 10 feet back from that, where my mouse is right here. And that rises up. I think that's about 35 feet. And then that goes back to 50 feet. So the peak of this roof is 50 feet. And that's 35 feet further back from this point. So you really get, again, that kind of boop, 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 and then up to here. And out in the distance, you can see this agglomeration in lighter lines beyond this cut. And now we're going to move forward and cut through that section. Sorry, that's the wrong way. Okay, so now if we cut through here, so now we're cutting through a retail section of the building. So I see retail, I see it coming up above the residential. There's the retail pavilion at 25 feet. And here's 2 residential floors. Again, that peak of the roof is the same roof as we saw before at 50 feet. And out in the distance is that single point, that single 55-foot high height. But again, you see like here we are in this kind of like cozy network of spaces where this peak and this building is relating to this and creating a sort of a protected area for people to dine and walk around.
Mark, this is Rich. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So your floor-to-floor dimension on the retail space is 15 feet. And I guess you got some glue lam trusses, et cetera. It might be 2.5 feet thick. What's the clear height in the retail space?
I'm not really sure what our system's going to be, but say it's 12.
And we were trying to, Paul had to remind me that we had already agreed to something higher for another project, but 10 feet isn't enough in that retail space. You really feel like 12 is critical?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to create real. We're going to have trouble filling this with great users. I think even we're a little short here. Like 15 clear would be great.
Agreed. I think 12 is pushing it. It is pushing it with modern retail tenants. 10 would certainly be too low. Would agree that we strive to get 15 certainly in the projects that we're doing mixed use where we have residential above retail.
And you do exposed mechanical, or are you dropping ceilings in those places?
Depends on the tenant, right? We do like to do a lot of exposed mechanical, but some tenants don't like that. But certainly, anywhere that we could, we'd like to do it, spray it, and give you that little sense of extra volume. Plus, folks seem to like the little bit of that industrial look, certainly in cafes and, you know, the Urban Outfitter type, you know, retail spaces, you know, apparel spaces. So.
Okay.
So kind of the compromise part of the scheme, Rich, is that we've tried to sort of give these big commodious entryways to give a real feeling of height and graciousness, and then we can sort of cheat down in the back and save the couple of feet back there. This is cutting through the lobby. So here, the peak of the roof is at 36 feet high, and we've got these 3 gables, one of which has a chimney. Whether it's an actual chimney, we'll see, but that's going to be 48 feet high. But you can see that the sort of the activation, this comes in as sort of a civic scale, a traditional civic scale building, single story civic scale building, with a doorway that's articulated to relate to the human scale. Beyond it again.
Mark, how close is that to the street or to the, you know, going back from Burton House?
Yep.
About.
So let me pull out my site section because I don't have it labeled here. So it's 120 feet, and that's probably about 15 feet further back. So like 135 feet.
Okay.
And that's really this big, you know, open plaza space. And that's what we're trying to, And you can see the building beyond, you can see the balconies on this wall, articulated, moving in and out. And then beyond it, this building comes and steps down over here, and we'll cut through that. We'll cut through the very highest part of that at 55 feet. So here, like apropos of what I was just saying, Gretch, here you walk into this retail space, blammo, this big kind of light-filled, clear story space, but then the actual retail space is going to be smaller as it moves back and deeper into the building. 2 stories of residential above. Hopefully we'll be able to do some lofted, vaulted spaces for these special units that are up at front, and then attic space above. But again, you can kind of see, here's a person, here's where that shed ends right here, and here's that ridge in section. So you're walking along, this is the absolute highest point of the whole project, but it doesn't even come out all the way to the street. We take it on a walk all the way down as it comes out, articulated with 4 different materials along the way. So it's really almost like, you can think of it as like an onion strategy of just sort of walking this thing down and peeling back the layers.
And the gable is just the trusses, Mark? If there's no mechanical or any kind of any other mechanical functions of the building in that gable?
No, the real function of it is to shed snow and rain. Is
okay.
Is the function.
Rich, we do sometimes and I don't think we need to harp on this, and we certainly haven't designed this building to this level of detail. As we would certainly for a site plan, but in our gables, oftentimes without adding extra windows, we do sometimes tuck a loft in there. Folks, and in particularly now, folks like to have a little loft up above. We generally put it up above the kitchen area. They're generally in our standard apartments about 120 square feet or so. And again, they don't have any extra windows. You basically just kind of open air down below, but provides a little workspace, little den space up there for folks who might be working at home. So we do sometimes try to capture a little bit below the truss system.
I'm so glad you brought that up now, because that actually informed a lot of this facade strategy with these dormers. So that window wouldn't be on the loft space, but that way you'd have the opportunity to have almost 2 stories of light coming in, and that would brighten up the interior space of that loft.
Okay.
And then the building terminates with almost an identical section to what we saw on the right-hand side. Again, stepping back, and then up to a 50-foot height. There's that dormer, by the way, out in the distance, just beyond the cut line. I want to switch gears for a second, and Noah, maybe you can do some talking here.
Sure. So We want to focus also on the existing Bed 1 site, right, and on the site overall. So one thing that we didn't really hit on so much, but we do want to emphasize first, and then I'll go on to sort of the rest of our thinking around the Bed 1 site. You can see the pedestrian connection here to Pluckerman Park. During a prospective site plan process, if and when this gets to that point, we'd flesh this out in a lot of detail, but what Mark described was we've tried to create this pedestrian connection down from Pluckerman Village into the plaza, and then create this lovely pedestrian area and a plaza where cars don't dominate, but people do. And the comment came up from a number of folks on this board and from the mayor that we have a little connection. You know, we had a conceptual connection to Pluckerman Park, but isn't there a better opportunity to make a real connection? And I think that as we thought about this, we thought about doing it at the sidewalk, doing it out on the road, which was where we had thought about it before. But the more we thought about it and the more we looked at the topography of the site, right across from this relatively large plaza area where the plaza is very wide in the middle, then it skinnies, and then it gets wider again. Right across from that plaza area, which is back basically behind the striping that dedicates the left out and the right out from the driveway entrance, and certainly back far enough that a car would have visibility. And I think we need to talk through this a little bit, think through it in a site plan process. Certainly, the grade is relatively flat in the woods across the ring road there, heading into Pluckerman Park. And so as we started thinking about this, we thought about, well, with the township's cooperation here, could we open up those trees there and really provide not a narrow path, not a sidewalk up on the street, but something pretty gracious, maybe call it 10 feet wide, you know, with a little grove here and a tree here, and it's a very naturalistic sort of path where pedestrians, kids after their baseball games, bicyclists who've come down, folks who play basketball, can move back and forth between the two sites and then up and down from Pluckerman Village in a much more substantial connection here, really tying the green network in here to the village. And so we've not developed that yet, but what we have developed is that we basically have crossed off, assuming we can do this safely. We want to give cars enough time if they're turning in to be able to see pedestrians crossing, right? That we want to pull this connection back a little bit and then make it substantial going through the woods. One of my favorite little things every year, and it's a sort of an inspiration for this idea, is that my folks live in Door County, Wisconsin, which is up at the very tip of the peninsula that divides Green Bay from Lake Michigan. And there's a Shakespeare theater up there. And the Shakespeare theater up there is it's outside, and it sits under a huge oak tree. But the way that you arrive at the Shakespeare theater, and we do this every year because we send the kids, mostly to get them out of our hair, but also because they like this. We send the kids a week early to my parents, and they go to Shakespeare camp for a week. And then Sarah and I go out there, and when we arrive on the Friday during which the kids are going to have their play. And as you walk to the Shakespeare theater, it's set out in the woods, and there's this path, a walking path that meanders through the woods and you arrive there through this path. And it's a very poetic moment. And we think that we could do something similar here, where we're providing a very naturalistic path into the plaza, back into the park, and then eventually connecting to Pluckerman Village. So we're just starting to work on that idea, but we think it could be an important final connection, a cherry on top to what we're trying to achieve here.
Do you think you'd have a pedestrian bridge or something over that ring road? Because I could imagine there'd be a lot of traffic coming through there.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and that's why we tried to move it back. It may not yet be back far enough. We may have to pull the building in just slightly here and try to get the connection to be a little farther. I think we might try to do differential pavers there so that a car would recognize that it is in a different space. Maybe a little hump. We don't like to put speed humps because they're very loud.
Yeah.
But maybe a little hump and some differential pavers there that would be wide, you know, call it like 15 feet, you know, where a car would turn and have a good 25 to 30 feet before they hit those differential pavers. They'd see it in front of them. If there were pedestrians there, they'd certainly see the pedestrians. There'd be a sign. But that's why we tried to pull it back from the road a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's a wonderful idea. It gives you advantage to the park where you don't really have any amenities, so to speak, as far as outside amenities. You know, you'll probably have inside amenities, but not outside. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and I mean, the hope would also be to draw, I mean, draw folks from the park into the plaza and then up into
Sure.
Tuckerton Village, you know, really like so that folks, you know, don't drive to the weekend baseball game and then get back in the car and drive back home,
Mhm.
you know,
Uh-huh.
but rather linger a little bit in the village. So
Yep, they're going to meander.
and I'm sorry that I waxed poetic there. It really is a lovely entrance to think about. And so we were thinking about something like that too. You know, you wouldn't kind of like clear cut a path 15 foot wide of these trees and pave it, you know? No, it'd be something where you'd leave a tree here and a tree there where folks walked around. Like it would be natural. So zooming back out, and this was a comment from last meeting, folks we wanted to take stock of the whole site again. And we also wanted to respond in general and in diagrammatic form here to some of the comments about the density on the site. And one of the things driving the density on the site is clearly that when you put affordable units into a building along with market rate, there's a cost to that. The returns take a bit of a hit. And what was really driving some of our thinking around the economics of this was the parking deck that we were going to use in order to supplement the parking that was being lost when from the surface parking for the building. So one of the ways that we thought about responding to the questions on density and maybe decreasing the overall density of the site here was to phase in the deck of the parking. And so that we would do some modest expansions of surface parking as a first phase here, and then expand the deck in response to tenancy. That will allow us to bring the density of the project down, the unit count of the project down overall, because it decreases our upfront cost in the project. And so we wanted to just show the whole site, talk about that in concept a bit, and we don't need to linger on it, but we've identified a couple areas where we could add a modest amount of surface parking while certainly maintaining the berms that are there today. And we're going to show you a section, because it was asked for, of the full expanse of the deck that we're proposing, but also a half expanse of the deck. And we want to note that these two berms here, when you look at them, they're circled in green. They're pretty significant, actually, when you look at the topography of the site. They're
Yes.
plus or minus 8 to 10 feet. When we went to model the deck and try to show a rendering of it, we had to choose the entry drive of the office building, because if we chose anywhere else on 202, you really could not see the building. And so we didn't want to be disingenuous about it, but it also does speak to the fact that those berms are significant. So here's the deck at its fullest height with landscaping around it. This is 3 elevated levels of deck. It is below the height of the office building. I think Mark has conceived of it to sort of mirror the horizontal elements of the building, so that
No, where are you looking from at that point?
Great. So you are headed south on 202 right now, just passing the entrance to the office building.
Okay. Right there. Okay.
Yep, you're right there. And so you're looking in. Now, this is landscaped. We also wanted to show you with no landscaping, which we won't do, but just to show you what the structure is. So this is the structure. Again, our plan is to landscape this, and certainly through a site plan process, this would be required, to landscape it with trees and vegetation, but also we've shown some ivy here, and whether it be ivy or screening, the full intent would be to have some green screen on the facade of that parking garage. So this is the full extent if it were to be built up at the end of all the phases here of the parking enhancement to bed 1. This is a half an extent. This is 2 elevated, not quite a half, maybe 2. This is 2 elevated levels. And so to the degree that we expand the surface parking as a first phase and then phase in, if this were to be the ultimate end degree of the deck, which is plus or minus what we would like in terms of a parking ratio for the building. Right now, the building is currently underparked at about 4 per 1,000. This at 2 levels with the surface expansion would get us closer to 5 per 1,000. 5 to 6 is probably the standard in the market right now. We feel like we could be relatively comfortable at 5. But this would be the
That's
extent.
the non-COVID standard, Noah?
Yeah. Yes, the non-COVID standard. And you know, but you know, that's it's funny. I mean, that I take that comment as a joke, but that's actually a very serious comment, right? Like that, the degree to which we want to keep these buildings healthy and full, you're absolutely right. We don't know exactly where this will shake out, which is another reason for the phasing in here.
Yeah, I think an argument could be made that we'll never return to that benching standard of 5 or 6 per thousand.
Yeah,
And
who knows?
we're going to permanently be, distancing to some degree or another and not crowding people in the same way. But
Right.
I agree.
It could be very well. I mean, these standards went from 300 to 250 square feet per person down to 150, and they are certainly marching back up to where they were 15 years ago.
let me ask you a question about the rendering though, Noah.
Please.
You added this screening.
Yes.
Is this what the screening looks like after 15 years, or is this the screening day one?
No, so I think that if we did, it's a good question. So the trees, I think we can do various levels of evergreen and deciduous trees, different caliper of the deciduous, of the evergreens. We can start out certainly higher, and the screening. So Rich, in all honesty, it won't look like this day one. There's no question, but we would hope that it would be closer to 5 years than to 15 that it gets to this point. And the screening, I think we could do relatively quickly, whether it be by trellis and vine, which is something that we like quite a lot. We're proposing that on a number of buildings that we're doing right now that are a little bit more commercial and industrial in scale. That I think could take hold in under 2 years, Rich. So I think that we have some strategies that we could screen this certainly much quicker than the 15 years you asked about.
Noah, what's the elevation level from 202 to down to the office right now? It seems to me you can hardly see the building from 202 anyway.
I will tell you in 1 second. I will bring up my topo survey here and I will tell you. Okay. Bear with me just a second, please, Carol.
No problem.
Okay, so the office building sits right now. I'm just zooming in here at right about 175 is the ground plane at the office building, which interestingly is basically the ground plane at where the mixed use project is going to be as well.
Uh-huh.
The berm out front on the road is 184. The one to the north of the entry drive, it's 189, 190 at its peak to the south of the entry drive, and the entry drive is at 180. So that building sits 5 feet below the entry drive, and it sits 10 to 15 feet below the berms.
Now, when you say below the berm, what about the sidewalk itself there in front?
Sure. So the sidewalk. And Rich, you mean where are we talking with the sidewalk? I'm sorry.
The sidewalk at 206.
Oh, okay. So that elevation is between 180. It's like 181.
Sidewalk?
Yep.
The berms are higher. Aren't the berms higher, Noah, than the sidewalk?
Oh yeah. The berms are up at
184,
184 and 190 respectively. 191.
Sidewalks are on the highway side of the berm. Yeah. Yep. Like 10 feet below the top.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you really can only see this building when you're right at the driveway on 202, 206 for the most part.
For the most part. I don't think we would want to represent it's going to be invisible. But yeah.
No, but it's significant. It is.
Yep. And just to be clear, any expansion of that surface parking in a first phase, the areas we're thinking about will keep those berms in place. That is, there's no thought to violate those berms. It respects all of the setbacks, the parking setbacks in the ordinance, et cetera. So that's what we had to show tonight. We hoped that we dealt with sort of the site overall. I thought the sections that Mark showed certainly responded to some of the thoughts around the scale of the building out front from Burnt Mills Road, and put it in that context. And that's sort of where we'll leave off. We hope that was responsive to the board's questions from last time.
Well done, Noah. I thought it was very helpful. I'll open it up to the board. Does the board have any questions about what you've seen?
Yeah, Noah, question for you, it's Jeff. With what we were just looking at, as a matter of fact, what we're still looking at here, this is the first structure, and then one that's closer to the highway would be later. Is that what your thought process was, if you needed it?
So, Mark, if you wouldn't mind going back to the plan, please.
Yeah, the one that's closer to the highway, up on the right-hand side of the Bed 1 building.
Yeah, so those would be surface, not structure, just surface.
Gotcha.
And those would likely be in the earlier phase, Jeff.
All right, so you wouldn't see that at all. So it's all structure. So the only deck really is the one in the dotted line below the building on the left.
Correct. And what I should have done when Carol asked about the what the elevation was of the office building, I should have also told you what the elevation was back in that area. And it's roughly the same as the office building. Your grade lines there, as you would imagine, are, about 175 at the front of that deck, and then they drop down at the back of the deck to 170.
Right, and then on the highway ramp behind it is elevated above your lot anyway. So
yeah,
something else to think about.
Yeah, we really tried. I mean, that seemed like the most logical place for a deck. Put it back on the highway and tuck it in an area where the grade falls off on the site.
Yep, I think it's a good move.
Anyone else from the board?
Yeah, I have a question about people
Yeah, Nick?
in the apartments in the new area. So they drive and park here, and it seems to me they have a long walk.
Nick.
In the elements.
No, sorry.
Where
So
place?
the parking for the mixed use building has two surface lots, one that's being circled there, one there, and then a covered deck under the building itself, Nick. So there's designated parking for the residential. That site parks itself at about 2 to 1.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the parking garage, Nick, is strictly for the commercial property.
The office building, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yep, that's right,
All
Carol.
right, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Anybody else?
Yep.
Who is this? Wait a minute. Who is this? Lou? You're very muffled. We can't hear you, Lou.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Yep.
Okay. So Noah, pre-COVID, in the past, were you at a point where this building was fully occupied, and did you ever have problems with parking at that point when the building was fully occupied? It seems to me that I've passed the building many times. It seems to me that I don't know that you're ever going to really need all of this extra parking. Maybe I'm wrong, but can you give us a little thought on pre-COVID parking requirements, need, building usage, all that kind of thing?
Okay, thanks, Lou. Yes, a good question. So the building, I mean, fully occupied, no, but up between 90 and 95% occupancy, yes. And at that point, the parking requirements were sufficient for the building. We did not feel an incredible strain. As we look forward, and again, we began this planning process. I think Rich's comment is right. We began this planning process when the per square foot per employee was still on a downward trend, and we were hearing tenants wanting to have a greater parking count because they were cramming people into smaller spaces. We're now on a different trend, and I think that you might be right, Lou. So the initial phases of the surface parking, what we would try to do would be to replace the parking that is being lost by the apartment building, and that is 206 spaces. And then we would not go to build the deck unless it was in response to that demand. So I think what we would do is do the surface parking until we felt that the leasing was straining the parking, the parking area, Lou. And we would want then to be able to have the right to build the parking structure. But in response to your question, even at 90 to 95% occupancy, the existing parking seemed to be pretty much well aligned with the usage in the building.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else on the board? Any more questions?
I just have a question. And Paul, I'm just looking at these proposed things. I think ultimately they're going to have a lot coverage issue if they build all the potential expansion that they're talking about here.
Well, I think, Rich, that's one thing that we have to deal with, and that's really the development of the ordinance. And the ordinance needs to recognize what the lot coverage parameters might need to be in order to make this a viable project.
How many so to that end, Noah, how many square foot is the building now? 200,000?
No, so the building is 160,000 square feet, 161,000 square feet. It's about 56,000 square foot footprint, plus or minus, a little bit larger.
Okay, but it's 161,000 square feet. So 4 per thousand is 640 spots or plus or minus, right?
Yep.
And if you have the retained lots, the retained surface lots that you have, and you build the structure, how many spots would you have?
Depends on how high we went with the structure. So,
well, as you're proposing here, three levels.
Right. Again, if we are, and I do just want to make this clear, this is somewhat in response to the comments that we had about density on the apartment project. So as that comes down, I think that the impetus to do a surface parking expansion first becomes important to us. So let's walk through just a little bit, and I will do that for you in a second here, those calculations. Okay, so the existing surface under the parking deck is 100 and you'll have to bear with me because this is a lot of information, but I will try to do it as succinctly as I can here. Sorry.
All right, no, it's Todd. It's 136 under the site where the parking deck is.
Yes, thank you, Todd. And I just want to I have here, it's in my PDFs. I have a count of the deck here. Okay, great. So if you build the deck, you lose about 30 spaces of those spaces that Todd just referenced. And if you build it with 2 levels, that's 317 cars in the deck and on the surface. You can then go up by a half level and gain yourself about 50 cars per half level, Rich, as you march up in that deck. So in order to get to that level, we would likely have to do, if there were no surface parking, we would likely have to do the full 3 levels of the deck. I think if we were to do the surface
so the
parking,
only way you get, I'm trying to follow you. So the only way you get to 600 plus parking spaces is to build the 3 levels of the deck. Leave that, go back to the last slide if you could. Leave that existing large surface lot out by the perimeter road, right? On 206, that one. Leave that, build a 3-story structure, and then the rear lot going back towards the residential. If you did, and that would be surface back there?
yes.
So surface and surface on either side of the structure, plus the existing ring that you have off the circle, which is visitor, right?
Yep.
Right? And how much would those 4 lots, how much would those 4 lots get you to? Including the
approximately to the count that we were talking about, Rich, approximately the mid 6s to 7.
Okay, so if you wanted to, if for some reason or another we return to a benching type of operations where people want 5 and 6 per thousand in their office space, and you need to have parking to accommodate that, you would at least have to do that inner ring off the existing large surface lot before you would go ahead and build that lot in front of the building.
Maybe. I think that the potential parking area in front of the building, right in front of the building there, is probably the most efficient that we have. And so I think that if we're talking realistically about how we phase this, I think that would be probably the first one that we would like to build, that surface lot. And just for everybody's context, what is being shown on the plan here would add about 10% to the impervious coverage of the site as it is right now with those parking, the expansion of the surface parking diagrams there.
With all of them, it's 10%?
I missed the question. I apologize.
With all of them, it's 10%?
With all of them, it's a little more than 10%. You're probably closer when you get down to putting sidewalks and connections there. We've only diagrammed this out. You're probably closer to 15%.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about all that lot coverage myself.
Well, I think it's certainly, when we did this, and some of what we've been thinking about, Rich, is that you would have, especially with the new DEP stormwater regulations, you'd have some pretty serious underground detention, and then also certainly water quality BMPs that you're going to have to install here for these. But we also don't want to make it sound like this would just be a sea of blacktop. I think that this, ultimately where we'd like to land with the surface expansion is somewhere in the range of 60 to 65% impervious coverage, which is not, in my mind, wholly out of keeping with sort of updated standards of suburban, urban, commercial buildings.
Okay.
So, no, just say that again now. You would build the parking garage before you would build the additional? No.
We build the surface first.
You would build the surface first and then go to the parking garage if you need more.
In response to demand,
Okay.
yeah.
And you would try to do a 2-level, and then you'd be able to expand to a 3-level if you needed.
Correct.
Okay, just so I got it straight. Okay. All right. Anything else? I was talking to the public, the board members. So is there anybody else on the board? Let's see if they have any more questions.
Yeah, no,
Anna?
this is Anna. So you
Yes.
had talked about if you're phasing in the parking, there will be an effect on the density, but we never
Correct.
actually talked about what that effect was going to be.
So TBD, but certainly, so we've been talking about, again, 180 units, but I think that we heard a number of concerns from the board about that density, that one, that was a lot of units, and that two, it might just be, anyway, that was what we heard from the board. And so I think that density could decrease by a not immaterial number if we're able to save some upfront costs here by not building the deck initially, Anna.
And what is a not immaterial number?
Certainly double digits. And I think, yeah.
Yeah, Anna, it's something that I've been talking to with Tom a little bit, Frank, taking a harder look at the agreement we have with Fair Share Housing, looking at those obligations. And, I think by the time we have our next meeting, we will have a firm number.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to get a sense for what the impact would be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet, Ann. We're working at it.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I did not mean to be coy, Anna. Okay.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're working at it. Anybody else on the board?
Yeah, it's Lou again.
Lou? Okay.
Yeah. I just want to know, I missed the first few minutes, I apologize. But have we decided on the total number of units? Has that ever been decided? It was back and forth a little bit last time.
That's what we were just talking about, Lou. And go ahead. Yeah, Mayor, you want to?
No, Lou, so I've been having discussions with Tom and Frank, looking at the Fair Share Housing Agreement, the obligations under there, having some discussions with Noah, and, sort of zeroing in on what we think is certainly going to work with our agreement, at the same time, not over developing a site. So we're not there yet, but we hope to have a final number, or certainly a not to exceed number, by the time we have our next meeting.
Okay, that's fine, because last time we talked about whether or not to bank some units or not bank units. So I'm glad that we're continuing that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on the board? Okay. I
Yeah,
think I'll
Carol,
open it up. Yes, who's this?
I'm sorry, Carol, it's Scott. I was
okay,
wondering,
go ahead.
I was wondering what the improvements were going to be to the ring road and how that might alleviate some of the issues that are going on at the corner of Burnt Mills and 206 there.
So we have not, Scott, I think specific improvements to the ring road, we have not nailed down. I think that it's clear that that road needs to be repaved, certainly, and that there could be some other improvements to it. We frankly have not nailed those down. I've kind of thought about them as a site planning exercise, but we haven't nailed anything down on them.
And Noah, it's Larry. Let me just, I quickly want to turn, we do have Chuck Levo, who's the township traffic engineer on this call. So I'm going to ask Mark, I think you've got an earlier drawing that shows the both the ring road and the intersection of Burnt Mills 202, 206.
Maybe you mean the first page.
Right. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Right. So certainly something that we've been pushing for from the town side is the perimeter road as a with some public right of way to it. Once again, that's also being it's also subject of some discussion, but also improvements to that wacky intersection. As you look at it from this aerial, you see it's not, those are not four square corners as they line up to 206 Burnt Mills and Washington Valley. And we had asked Chuck Levo to come up with some ideas and discussions with the county and DOT for what could be done. And the concerns being the the eastbound traffic on Burnt Mills making the left to proceed north onto 202, 206 south. I'm sorry, onto 202, 206 north.
North. Right.
The concerns had always been that because of the cycling there, that we've certainly heard examples of the light cycling 3 or 4 times before folks could make that left, that what they'll do is they'll drive straight and then turn onto Hills Drive from Washington Valley, go around Hills Drive to get onto 202, 206 north. And I certainly do know folks who have done that. So we know that there's obviously a problem leaving this project site to go north on 202. At the same time, we also have the problem of 202, 206 south backing up into Pluckerman Village, because when you're really at that light, it looks like you should have a dedicated left to head west. I'm sorry, okay, my direction's messed up. Making a left to turn east onto Washington Valley, 2 through lanes proceeding south on 202, 206, and then a right lane turn to travel west on Burnt Mills. Now, all of us who drive that intersection know that none of that really works. So, Chuck, if you don't mind talking a little bit here about some of the concepts, those that you've discussed with county and DOT, and those that you think might be additive to improve that intersection.
Absolutely. And Mayor, I think you've done a great job of laying the groundwork for what we've looked at and talked about so far with the Department of Transportation, the county, and much of that has to do with what the mayor referred to in terms of the phasing and the signal cycles that we see at Burnt Mills, Washington Valley, and 202, 206 today. So what we have been working with Noah's team on for some time now is coming up with an improvement plan for the signalized intersection, new signal equipment, more efficient cycling of that light so you don't get these rather circuitous movements through Hills Drive and other areas that happen as a result of, quite frankly, old signal equipment and inefficient signal phasing and timing. And at this point, we have conceptual agreement with the Department of Transportation and the county as well that those improvements can be made. And I also think, I don't want to speak for the developer, that we have conceptual agreement about those improvements being made perhaps as part of this project. And I think when you couple those public street improvements, the roadway network improvements, along with chasing that down the road southerly towards where you have the lane drop as you enter in 202, 206 southbound into the Bed 1 site, we've talked about repurposing a lot of that pavement there that, quite frankly, is being used for vehicles making a right turn into the site when it could be used for the traveling public as they continue further to the south. And so taking those types of improvements and then looking also, I think Mark talked about some excellent design features that are just south of Burnt Mills into the site. Those are important connections, those pedestrian connections that allow for more walkability, bicycle traffic. All of those elements are very important in terms of reducing this reliance on the motor vehicle and creating a site that really does have great connection. I think the idea of connecting to the park to the west is extremely important. Also connecting more so to the Bed 1 portion of the site. If we can have office, retail, residential, recreation, if we can create those connections here, I think we can create those connections to the north as well. And perhaps by looking at the ring road with some of the same design features that Mark talked about in that pedestrian retail plaza area, we can carry that through the site, because I think it would be a shame if we put all that attention to pavement markings, to more open areas, recreation areas where you can have both passive and active recreation, pedestrian connection, as well as motor vehicle traffic. And if we stopped it in the northerly part of the site and didn't carry it all the way through, I think that would be a shame, because I think there's some great design principles that are being furthered when you do that. So the ring road has always been, or this road that carries around the westerly and southerly perimeter of the site. I think what we've thought about this road and talked to Noah's design team about is trying to achieve some utility to the road, but we're not looking to create a high-speed bypass road. I think that would be out of context of what this redevelopment project is all about. But I do think there's ways to carry the design features of the pavement, the striping, some of the texture type improvements that were being talked about by both Noah and Mark, and carrying that through the ring road. So you do have an option for motor vehicles interior to the site that it doesn't feel like a private roadway as it does today. The wayfinding to the roadway today feels like it's an office park that you're driving into. So I think if we can achieve the improvements to 202, 206, the county roadway system, and these improvements within the site itself, we have a lot of times when we talk about traffic, we're only thinking about the motor vehicle. But I think here, if we can achieve these improvements, we're talking about bicyclist traffic, we're talking about pedestrian traffic, and we're speaking about balancing that with the motor vehicle as well. I think that's a really important aspect of the project.
And Chuck, thank you for the comments. I can say, so first of all, we have been working with Chuck and with Gary Dean for quite some time, and did get that conceptual approval from NJDOT, which is great. We now need to take the next step and really begin to engineer this, which we have a proposal for and are ready to move on that, which is great. Chuck, I will just add one thing. If we had our dream tenant for the retail pavilion out front, it would be a bicycle store, a high-end bicycle store. Which would be totally amazing. Our general counsel at KRE is an avid biker. He probably bikes like 200 miles a week, maybe more. And he says that his favorite ride begins right in around this area. He rides to
Mills Road.
So that would be our dream tenant.
Sounds great. I think that works.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and as you know, in the Bedminster community, there are there are bike path bridges above some of the more major highway infrastructure, and you don't see that very often in communities. So there's a great commitment here, I think, to that type of traffic and that mode of traffic. And so if we can achieve the architectural visions that we have here from Mark and his team, with marrying that with the traffic vision, I think we, and perhaps the retail tenancy vision, we can really create something pretty amazing here.
Good. Thank you, Chuck. That was terrific. That answer your question, Scott?
That was fabulous. Really, I can't wait to see how this all gets implemented. I think the creativity being presented, and the way our professionals and our board is interacting with these guys this is kind of cool to be a part of, and you're all to be commended.
Thanks. Thanks for your comments, Scott. Anyone else from the board? No, not hearing anybody. I'll open it up to the public.
Carol,
Yeah,
Rich,
oh.
I'm sorry, I was taking a
Oh.
bite. Taking a bite.
Oh, I thought you were taking a nap. It's okay. Go ahead, Rich.
I have a question because I'm not sure where I missed this, and maybe it's just me. Is it just me, or was not the parking structure part and parcel of this solution?
No, Rich, in our initial planning, we were thinking of this parking structure as one of the main, if not the main, ways to replace the parking that was going to be lost. As we've stepped back and thought about this, and in conversations about the density of the project, we've expanded our thinking now to some of the surface lots.
And again, and now you're talking about expanding the surface lots before you would build the structure.
That's correct.
All right. All right. So the heartburning I was getting was not because of my my Alzheimer's. It was because you changed the scope.
No,
All right.
that is true, Rich. And I think a key Paul brought up is, working with stormwater management on this for the density of the surface.
Yep.
Okay.
I will open it up to the public now, if anyone has any questions. Janine, if you'll look and see.
I got limited, I got 6 at a time here.
I can't hear you, Janine.
Sorry, I said, give me 1 sec. I got limited time since we're still shared.
Oh, okay. All right.
I do not see anyone with a hand raised.
Is Kathy Christie still up there?
Okay.
I don't see.
All right. Well,
Madam Chairman, it's Tom Collins.
yes.
I just would like to go over a few things that Noah and his team have communicated with me and Paul and Frank. And,
Okay, I just want to close it to the public then. Go ahead, Tom. Go ahead. Tom,
so,
go ahead.
so we're and they're kind of they're kind of things you would probably think we would have to work on. And you remember, we have a draft ordinance, but it needs to be fleshed out, and so we're trying to do that. One of the key items that is important to Noah's team is that they think they would like their monument sign that would be for the apartment buildings to perhaps be shared with the retail users of the mixed use portion of the building. And I think that's probably a creative and good idea. And that, so that, the way we had structured it was like you could have a sign for the apartment and the sign for the retail. So some changes on, basically allowing a monument sign, maybe a little bigger, to be out by Burnt Mills Road and identify the apartment complex and also the occupants of the retail spaces. And then they'd like some freedom about the signage on the facades of the retail spaces, and they'd like be able to have creative signs there, not as restricted as at the King Shopping Center. And Paul and Frank and I agree with that to a large extent, but we have to sort of narrow down how big and things like that, which I think can work very well. They
I
also,
assume you'll name the project, right, Noah? You'll
At
you'll
some point,
name
we'll
it.
Name the project,
So
yes.
you'll have a destination point, I'm assuming, right?
Yes, us picking a name for this project will take as long as the whole design of the project will take.
I bet.
So,
just
Yeah.
let one of your kids decide. That'll make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
Flip a coin.
That's how Google got named.
they're always more creative. But so, and there are things, and yes, we do want to talk with them about coverage. But I do want to say this to the board. By looking at the whole site, you get to work on how will it all look after the completion. And to the large extent, the numbers you use in the bulk standards of the whole site, and let's say the office portion and the mixed use portion, they become a way to make this work well for both the township, the board, and the applicant. So bear with us, and we'll give you good advice. We'll give you good, careful advice, Paul, me, and Frank, about what we recommend. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I also think they'll want to detail some of the things that we talked about at the prior meeting, and we'll try to put some of those things in the ordinance. For example, they don't want to use the name Hardy Plank as a brand, but they would like to be able to use low maintenance synthetic clapboard materials and trim. And we'll find some way to find that so that we get quality.
We're losing you, Tom.
So it may become important that the parking spaces be closer to the ring road in order to get more spaces. And of course, we're going to have a structured parking perhaps close to the ring road, and that might be good, but that might be some setbacks, especially if the ring road is a separate lot. And Paul and Frank and I tend to prefer that the ring road be a separate lot, which allows certain conveniences for the review of it and for the way it could be structured. So just, those are things that we'll be working on. And of course, we'll be working on the maximum number and the minimum affordable. So Paul or Frank, did you want to add anything that I might have missed on
Yeah, I was
those?
going to ask Frank, you have anything, Frank, you want to say further right now? You need to unmute, Frank. Frank, you need to unmute.
I was trying, Carol. It's very frustrating.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. No, I think Tom really covered. Basically, we've had some back and forth talking about fine tuning the ordinance, but essentially the concept that you all have developed up until now is in the stage of refinement where we're not talking about drastic changes to what you all have been talking about. We're making the numbers work basically so that we can accommodate what we've planned for here. That's all I have for now.
Okay, good. Paul, anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think Frank and Tom have summed it up pretty well. This is an iterative process, and we just have to come up with something a little more solid for the board so you have the whole package.
Yeah, I got it. Yep. Okay. I think that's all we have right now. Again, thank you, Noah and Mark, for all your contributions. And of course, Chuck, too. You contributed a lot tonight, so we thank you. There's anything else?
Madam Chairman, maybe
Yes.
if the board wants to, maybe and if you and the mayor want to, maybe we want to say when we would meet again about this.
Sure.
For
Okay.
at least probably one more work session. And then if you're comfortable, maybe that date you will recommend or pick a date for a master plan amendment hearing, which is the public hearing, notice public hearing for changes by the board, okay?
Well, do you have a
So-
suggestion, Tom, as to when?
Um,
We have our reorg on the 7th of January, and then we do have an applicant on the 14th. So,
Yeah, I don't want to do it on the night of application, so
Right,
maybe
you
the
wanna-
first, maybe the first
The first
meeting in
meeting?
February, but don't put any applications on that night, maybe?
okay,
don't
we
know
don't
if that-
have anything, do we, Paul? Paul, do we have anything on that night?
Well,
February?
we haven't scheduled a night for 2206 LLC yet, which is the Bed 2 site. We have not, and B&D, I've been in touch with their attorney today, and it looks like they will be coming back fairly quickly. So we have two that are going to be pretty close to being heard. Now, we have the second meeting in February as well. I think the B&D application will be relatively short. The Bed 2 application will be considerably longer.
Yeah.
Potentially you could do both the same night if we do the short one first and then see how far we get on the second one.
Oh, it's Larry. I know Janine was trying to get a few words in.
I was also told that we would be discussing on the 4th, the stormwater control ordinance. Judy gave me a memo that said that review for the land use board on the 4th. So I don't.
Yeah, and the context of that is under the state stormwater rules, we have to adopt a new stormwater control ordinance with some modifications to it. I've got that basically prepared. The governing body will introduce it in January. It'll be referred to the planning board for a consistency determination relative to the master plan, which frankly shouldn't be a very long discussion before it goes back to the township committee and gets adopted before March.
Carol, I was just going to say that, we have some momentum here. I do not like the idea of pushing the last work session to February. My recommendation is that we move forward with something in early to mid-January. And then,
Well, go ahead.
Honestly, January 14th, I believe, is supposed to be Lamington Farms, and to date, they have not resubmitted their new plans. So we are less than 45 days for Frank, Tom, and Paul to review that information. So I don't know that they will be heard January 14th. I mean, that's good.
is that the only thing on for the 14th?
That is the only thing on for the 14th. So that's going to be up to you guys. But if they don't submit soon with the holidays, I don't know when you're going to review that new package.
Do we have anything on, Janine, for the reorganization night?
We do not.
No,
We do
just
not.
reorg.
Just
And
reorg.
that's what I was going to say. You want to put it on that after reorg?
Reorg.
Yeah, I think that's good. But unless anybody thinks it's not, I think that's good.
Okay, let's identify those issues. Unit count for that date, the whether or not the ring road becomes a separate lot. I think those are the two open issues we heard tonight. Any other open issues?
There's little things that I mentioned, but you're right. Those are the two big picture issues. And we'll try to have a draft ordinance that's saying the things that we've been talking about.
Many.
Okay,
Revised
so
draft
let's put it on. Okay, let's put it on after the reorg then. That shouldn't take too long, the reorg.
Right, and
we can-
no other, the reorg should be quick, and don't put any other applications, Janine, on for this. What date is that, the 7th?
7th.
That's the 7th.
And is that going to work for the committee's reorg, Larry? When is your committee reorg?
The 4th.
Fourth,
The
okay,
Monday,
good.
Monday.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll leave the 14th open still for, what is it, Lamington?
Lamington Farms. Golf
Okay,
Club.
and then if they don't, we'll work around it somehow. Okay, sounds good. So we'll move on to the next thing on the agenda. Noah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say we will see you all on the 7th, and happy holidays.
Okay.
to everybody.
Very good.
Thanks,
You
guys.
too,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to a different subject. About a month ago, I was asked to put together a subcommittee to review the escrow accounts. Most of you probably have never had anything to do with the escrow accounts. And, I don't disagree with you. You haven't had to deal with it. But we did put together a subcommittee, and I have Nick, Lou, and Jeff. And I was very pleased to have all three of them because they have been familiar with escrow accounts in the past. So that was very helpful. So we've met a few times, and we looked at the escrow accounts, and we looked at the escrow schedule, and we've come up with a couple of suggestions that we'd like to actually implement, and we ultimately have to give that to the township committee, from what I understand. The process is not something that I'm actually as aware of either, but we'll make the suggestions and we'll take it to where we need to do. As you probably know, at our reorg, we will be looking at our professionals, and we will be renewing applications. So we'd like to add one paragraph to their contracts, and it helps with the timing of the billing. It's very important that bills from the professionals come in a very timely fashion. And if they come in months after the applicant has finished, it's difficult to collect from the applicant. So all we would like to say here is that the bills from the professionals come in 30 days after the last hearing, whatever that is, so that we can easier collect these funds. And if they don't bring them in, well, then the consequence would be that they may not be able to collect the funds. Now, that's not what we want to do, obviously. We want our professionals to get paid, but it needs to have that understood that they need to get them in a timely fashion. So that's something that I believe comes from John Bellardo, our township engineer. And if I'm wrong, we'll correct that. But that's one thing that we would like to do, and it's sort of an easy fix, at least on our side of the coin. The next thing that we'd like to do, and I'm going to back into this a little bit, is that we would like to have a disclaimer. And this disclaimer is signed by the applicant. And that tells the applicant that the escrow fees that are posted are not necessarily all of the funds that will be used for the professionals, but that they also would be told that all the bills from the professionals would be in within 45 days. So that gives a little bit of time from the town to collect the bills and get it out to the professionals, to the applicant, and be able to collect. That's the major object here, is to collect the funds for the town and make it a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. The third part of this is the actual escrow schedule. We are finding that it hasn't been updated in many, many years, mm-hmm. and it's not adequate to cover the costs. For instance, a residential lot, which we've all been through, and I'll use one of our applicants that was recent, was $1,000 was posted, and the actual cost came in at a much greater cost than that. And the applicant was aggravated because they had no idea that the cost would be over $2,000. So it's not, it needs to be collected upfront more. So by the actual means of being an escrow, people is implied that they'll get some money back. And that just isn't happening, because if you look at the overall cost of what takes place, our professionals, all three of them, 1 hour costs approximately $500. It's not an unreasonable amount for our professionals. But if they review the account, and then we have a meeting, let's say we have a meeting for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you're talking $500 an hour. So if you've reviewed your applicant and you pay $700, $800 for a review, and then you pay maybe 2 hours for a meeting, there's $1,000. So you're up to $1,700 already, and you've only collected $1,000. So we feel that it would be fair to collect $2,000, which is a much better amount for your average residential lot with a site plan perhaps and a couple of variances. And that way the cost would be covered and perhaps they'd get $100 or a couple $100 back in return. We're concerned about the residential customer or resident mostly because they're the ones that we want to improve their homes and better for everybody. It's better for the resident, it's better for the town, and so forth. Now, what we've tried to do is simplify the overall escrow schedule. And I've been working with Paul, and Paul agrees that we could make some changes. And he's had ideas that we need to take into consideration too. There is an application fee in addition to escrows. And there's some odd things that take place, like an interpretation. And there's also the stormwater management, which obviously becomes more costly on the engineering side. So those are the three elements that we'd like to do. We'd like to reduce it to paper and give it to the township committee because they ultimately have to approve it. So I'll open it up to my colleagues as on the subcommittee, if they have anything further they want to say. We had Nick, Lou, and Jeff. If any of you want to say anything further than what I've said.
I'm fine.
Yeah,
You're fine?
you pretty much covered pretty much everything that we've discussed. I mean, I think that it's important that we, sort of are collecting the amount that we need so that we don't wind up having a shortcoming, when have to ask for more,
No, I think chasing after the fact doesn't make a lot of sense. That's for sure.
That's never been my routine. But we
Carol?
want the, go ahead, Nick, go ahead.
I had another thought. I've been kind of out of it because of my surgery.
I know. But your
But
thoughts
on
are
the other
wanting,
hand, I have
believe
nothing
me.
else to do but think about this.
Well, that's good.
So I just thought we might consider and talk about the idea of a little bit of back and forth on the escrow amounts. Say an applicant comes in, reads our material, decides $1,000 check will do, submits the request, and then it's reviewed, obviously by Paul and the other professionals. And at some point we owe something back, which is, yeah, you're fine. We've scheduled you for February 11th or whatever.
Right.
Point, we could say, but now we see in more detail what you want, and you need to add another $500 to the escrow. Have a little bit of a feedback like that.
Well, that's kind of what I had in mind, Nick. A little different with especially with the single residential lot. I thought collecting $2,000 will cover what needs to be covered. If that application then goes into a second night, or any application for that matter, we automatically know that we're going into another meeting. A full meeting, which is usually 3 hours from 7 to 10, it's automatically $1,500. So we know we've got to collect more money instantly and not have that applicant scheduled for a meeting. We need to say that they are not prepared to go to a meeting until the escrow money is paid. I mean, I feel that they can't, get ahead of us. At the same time, we're not trying to gouge them, but we need to know that we're ahead of them. I think that that's a.
Carol, I have a question.
Yeah, who's talking? Sorry.
George.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you do me a favor? Take that $1,500.
Yes.
Break it down. Let's see where it goes.
What do you mean? Where does it go?
Well, where does it go?
Well, if you have 3 professionals, the 3 professionals together, it rounds off to about $500 an hour. So if you have a 3-hour meeting, you're talking $1,500. See, I backed into the numbers.
I guess my question is, pretend I don't know anything. Do you
Okay.
write a check to Ferraro Engineering for $500?
No. It's always to the township.
So break it down for me. How does it work?
I am, George. I am
Okay.
breaking it down. You have 3 professionals. And if you have 1 hour, it's approximately $500 because you have Paul, Frank, and Tom attending the meeting. So you have $500. So if you have a 3-hour
And their
meeting,
bill rates, Carol, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and their bill
Yes.
rates are someplace between $150 and $200 an hour?
yes, they're all less than $200. They're more than fair. I believe they're certainly within professional line, believe me. They're all good.
I would have a question, though. I spend a lot of money every year on consulting fees. And in the case of Paul and Frank and Tom, we're always very well represented. But
Yep.
for somebody like the husband and wife who came in just a couple of months ago, they had a pre-existing non-conforming use, and they wanted to
Correct.
put an addition on their house. And
Yep.
for somebody like those guys to have to spend $2,000 to do what they wanted to do, is a little burdensome. Let me put it that way.
I totally agree. And I think that's where we're headed, Rich, with this whole thing. I think having this disclaimer up front makes them understand that there are costs involved. And maybe they don't want to spend that $2,000. I mean, maybe that's just something that.
Well, can we challenge our professionals? Because in each case, we're dealing with a principal, right? Paul's the principal of his firm.
This is true.
Tom is a partner. Frank is the principal of his firm. Is there
Correct.
a way for some of these less technical applications for us to streamline the review?
Well,
Rich, all I would say is look at my bills. That's what I'd ask you to do. Look at my bills for the various types of projects.
No, I don't ever see your bill, so that's why I'm asking.
And Rich, wait a minute, just hold on a minute. This subcommittee has looked at the bills, okay? They've looked at Paul's bills, we've looked at Tom's and Frank's, okay? And the hourly rate is more than fair for professionals of their grade and the quality that we get. So it's not that, it's that the resident needs to know that these expenses do exist. So, and we want them to get paid. We want our professionals to get paid. We don't want to make it a burden for the town to have to try to collect these numbers. So if, for instance, let's take Nick, I don't think he'll mind. He came in a couple of years ago and he wanted to put a deck on his property and he was asked to put up an escrow fee. And when he came to the township committee or the land use board, he was given his application but the costs were there and he didn't expect them because he hadn't posted enough to cover the escrow and the fees. So he may not have gone for that extra foot or foot and a half or whatever it was that he put on his deck if he knew he had to spend $2,000 to do it. So that's what we're talking about here. The costs are there. If you have a review and a simple review for an applicant, you're talking an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, for the professionals to review the application, to see what the details are, to see what needs to be done so they can make their reports to us. So if you talk 2 hours, that's $1,000. Then they have to come to the board, even if it's another hour, just for us to have a simple application, you're talking $500. So there's $1,500 and we're only getting sometimes $500 or $1,000. We know it's more than that. So we shouldn't be trying to be disparate from the applicant. And that's why we want to have the disclaimer as well, so that they understand the facts and make it very transparent to them and still be able to collect what we need to do. It's an expensive process. Go ahead, Nick.
Could I add it? It's not only time in the meeting, I believe, but the professionals have to spend time at their office, preparing for.
Well, yeah, that's the review period.
Reading all the material.
Of course, that's the review period. And then you have a resolution at the end also that needs to be written.
Exactly.
So go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, Carol, if I could just, Anna, do you want to say something first? Do you have
Go ahead, I'll fill in after you.
Okay, so I just want to go over 2 points. And that is that, you know, being in a medical practice, I live and die by billing and collection. And
Hopefully just live, yeah.
yeah, and, and the thing is that when we have people come in and we tell them up front, this is going to cost you $2,000, they make faces, they get disgruntled, but they pay their bills because they understand what it's going to cost them. If we don't tell them what it's going to cost them, and then we send them a bill for $2,000 in the mail 2 months later or 6 months later, you better believe I get a phone call and it takes forever to collect that $2,000.
The words right out of my mouth, Lou. I think it's better that they would be transparent about it.
So the idea is to be transparent, let them know there are costs, these are what they're going to be. And hopefully if we can streamline this, you'll get a few $100s back, but don't bet on it because this is what the reality is of this. That being said, I am very much in favor of streamlining the process wherever possible for residents. They shouldn't have to spend an extra $2,000. They're probably taking a home equity loan and the project always runs double what they cost, expected. And so I think that there's any way possible that our professionals can look at this and say, oh, this is a simple application and let me just run by this real quick and get it finished. And I don't expect them to have less professional input, just somehow streamline it because it's a local resident. The other part, to Rich's point and to George's point, is that even though it might cost $500 per hour, where these escrow monies are getting used a lot of times is in the number of hours that are being billed by the professionals and usually outside of the meetings. So that's something that could be looked at. I don't know how to control that, but you know, for example, if something seems a little complicated and Tom and Paul and Frank do more hours outside, then that person's bill is going to be, you know, higher. So we looked at all of this, and I just really wanted to say I really sympathize with the residential property owners who are paying taxes because it's always a burden for them to do extra payments. But that's kind of my input there.
Yeah, to differentiate between the single residential homeowner and the one that's trying to do some improvements to his house versus a developer, that's a whole different thing. I looked at Elite's account, and Elite originally put up $5,000 and they're up at 43,000 now. So, but they understand because that's their business and they understand the escrow situation. That doesn't mean we should gouge them in any way, but we need to do the facts. They did have several meetings. They had several reviews. They had redos. So, you know, that's where the numbers add up, and it's just a fact. And so what we've done is we've tried to put things into categories, and I use 2000 as the example because it's the easiest to deal with. But we did then say we go up to a $5,000 escrow and see the complexity of the case. And if it takes a meeting, then that number should cover everything for $5,000. The review, a whole meeting, which is normally 3 hours, there's $1,500. Your review, you know, of perhaps 3 hours for the professionals, there's another $1,500. Then you have a resolution, and maybe they would get a couple of dollars back. Now, if you go into another category where you have something much more complex, we talked about getting $10,000 up front and then go from there. Every time there's a meeting, it has to have additional escrows because we know there's now another meeting. If it resolves itself in 2 meetings, great. If it goes on to 3 or 4, you know you've got to collect more escrow money. Paul, is there anything else that you might want to add to what, I'm sorry, Anna, go ahead, Anna, ask your question first.
Do we think, so a couple of things.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm not a fan of using junior professionals. I think our professionals are excellent. They are also time conscious. And you get more bang for your buck out of a professional that is conscious of their time and has the experience, where you would pay a lower hourly rate, but it would take more time for someone who's more junior. I don't think there's a net benefit there. Do we think $2,000 will cover most single family residential applications?
I think it will. I think if, our professionals are conscious, they recognize it's a single resident, and I think it will. We can take the Christie account, for instance, that came to $1,700, and that was relatively simple. I think all of you were on there at this case, maybe Tim wasn't, but the rest of you saw that case. The 1,000 did not, in fact, he put up $500. So he had to come up with another 12, which is twice more than what he put up to start with. I don't know if he was aware of that was what was going to happen, but it was, quite more than what the initial escrow was. And so I think $2,000 will cover for the majority, but that's why we also want the disclaimer. If for some reason there's some complexity that comes into it, then we need to let the homeowner know that this application is a little more complex and there will be more escrow.
And you were talking at the very beginning about adding paragraphs to our professionals' contracts. Are you suggesting we make them pay if paid, right? So they only get the balance of the funds if we receive it?
Well, I think it has to be there
You can't do that.
You can't do that, exactly, no.
Yeah, statutes are clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, our professionals are entitled to what they get paid, but we want to encourage them to get them in on a more timely fashion. And that's when the jeopardy comes in.
Do we have a statutory time frame for payments?
I don't know the answer to that. That's where
Not exactly, Anna. Basically, they shouldn't even have a meeting if their escrow is deficient. But that's rarely complied with.
Right.
We tell Janine, and Paul was strict about this, that people shouldn't start their hearing if they haven't paid their escrows.
Right, but if we're not,
I think they get.
agree with that.
Yeah, I think they get. I know we send our bill every month, and I believe we copy. I'm pretty sure all of us copy the applicant every month with the bill that you get. The bill goes to the township, copy to the applicant. The bill is paid by the township from the escrow funds.
Right.
But that's what's required in the statute. And
what happens if the escrow isn't big enough? Do the professionals?
The statute requires the applicant to pay the township the additional balance of the escrow and to pay all bills. Some people do try to renege on their obligation to pay. You haven't had too many instances of that, but it does happen. And when that happens, it's the township's responsibility to pay the bill.
Excuse me, Scott, Janine, Scott's got locked out. Scott's trying to get back into the meeting.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
So
Thank you, I didn't realize he was out. Okay. Scott, where are you? You there?
It's working.
His fish is here.
No.
There he is.
Oh, there you are. Okay, Scott, you're back in.
But
Your
is
audio?
there a statute about the professional submitting a bill that's very late? Is there some
There's no,
statute that says
there is no
that's-
not about that, Nick, directly, but it is important for the professionals to bill quickly and regularly. But there will be bills that occur after something, get this, especially after something is denied. And that's when usually the applicant reneges on their obligation to pay the escrow. Okay?
Well, that's all
When
the
the
more
application
reason.
when the application is denied, a lot of non-payers take place.
More reason to get it up front.
Absolutely.
More reason we need-
to have an escrow that's sufficient to cover the
That's
right,
expected
exactly.
cost, right?
Absolutely.
And to never have a meeting on someone who is deficient.
No, it's got to be paid for. It's got to be
Right.
paid for.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. And
Right.
but
And
that's
we'll
and that's
try
what you
to-
try to do. That is what Janine tries to do. That is what the planning department always tried to do. That's what Paul always tries to make sure
Yeah.
happens.
Well, that's why we thought that these suggestions would help that and help to collect. And that's what we need to do. We certainly want the professionals paid, and we don't want the town to have a difficult time. So anything we can do to try to make these suggestions to help is what we're trying to do. And I have been working with Paul to try to, secure these escrow amounts so that we can,
To fix it.
yeah. Any more questions from the board?
I wanted to apologize for getting dumped out. I missed about 10 minutes there. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Scott.
We decided it's all your fault.
Scott, Scott, I'm still not hearing you, but.
We all talked about you when you're out, Scott.
Yeah, no, apologies. I don't know what happened. I got dumped out and it took me about 10 minutes to get back in. So.
Oh, and you're the professional, Scott.
Hey, man, this is 2020 still. Mr. Murphy is my co-pilot.
Yeah.
Carol, I have a
Rich,
question.
did you have something? Yes, Rich, go ahead.
So as we consider changing the schedules,
Uh-huh.
do we benchmark those? Did you, as the subcommittee, benchmark those schedules against some of our neighboring townships?
We did look at the idea that our numbers are in line with other neighbors. We did look at it from that direction, yes.
Presently, or what you're proposing is in line?
No, well, there's a number of things. First of all, our rates that we're getting from our professionals, we looked at those rates to see if they're competitive. And then we looked at the escrow schedule, and with the help of Paul, we're trying to simplify it. So it's not quite as complex as it currently is. And Paul has agreed with that with some exceptions, and that's what we need to reduce to writing.
Okay, but my question was, are the changes to the schedules for $2,000 for this and $5,000 for that and $10,000, is that consistent with our neighboring townships?
Well, I haven't looked at their specific schedules, but I've looked at their professional fees and see what the actual
So
cost is.
presumably, if they're spending the same amount of time, then the ultimate cost will be the same.
Exactly. And
Okay.
how they collect those funds, I don't know how they collect them. That's up to them.
Part of me is concerned that if the fees are too high, we may be forcing people underground to do these improvements without coming to us.
I understand your concern. I don't know. How do you feel about Paul? Do you think that that would be something that people would do?
Well, you can never stop people from breaking the law and doing things they're not supposed to do.
Right.
You can't pass a law to make everybody follow the law.
Follow the law.
That's more than half the fun, right?
And you know what? When people do things they're not supposed to do, whenever there's a sale of the property and they do the Oprah request for all the open and closed permits, that's when it all hits the fan.
It catches up. Yeah.
So you had said that we hadn't looked at these in quite some time, and my expectation would be that, some of these other towns that maybe have, considered their escrows more recently might have already adjusted them to higher rates. And, and I'm just curious that we should be, if our fees are competitive with every other township, then our escrow should be competitive with every other town.
Well, Rich, you're operating on the assumption that every other town collects everything up front as quickly as they should. I can tell you, for example, that Far Hills, as an immediate neighbor, is always playing catch up.
Oh, all right. So some towns are not as efficient as we are in trying to collect the fees.
I would almost think that's the norm.
I would say that's the norm. I worked in a lot of towns throughout the state, and every town I worked in, you put up an escrow, and next thing you know, you get a bill, and then you get another bill, and you get another bill. And so to me, that's not reasonable for the applicant, and certainly not for the homeowner, the resident that lives. Like I said, the developer, the builder, they know the routine. They go through this. And I'm not saying that we should gouge them, but we should also, know that they understand that it's an expensive cost. And,
Well, and I'm not even suggesting that we're gouging them. What I'm, you said, I think at the onset, it's really not an escrow, is because when you pay an escrow typically for something, you expect maybe that's more than what it's going to be, and you're going to get something back at the end.
Exactly.
This is pay as you go.
That's correct. That is correct, Rich. Yes. And that's where the resident it's not 100% transparent, because they assume when they put up an escrow that they will get something back. And that's not happening because the numbers aren't realistic.
Well, it's just an estimate. Why don't we just change it to call it an estimate? But I hear you.
Because I don't think that's how you call it. You call it an escrow.
Right.
It's called an escrow.
It is an escrow, Rich, because it is put in it's all regulated by the municipal land use law.
On the side.
And it's put in a trust account for the applicant, designated such by the bank for the township. It's not technically the township's money. It's not even the professional's money until a bill is rendered and paid from the account. But I don't mean to be too critical, but I don't think it's realistic for an applicant to think that the escrow is a capped number. No professional I know thinks that an escrow on an application is capped. And maybe they do think that, but they shouldn't. And so your idea.
The resident might, Tom, the resident.
I understand that, but if they get an attorney, the attorney will explain to them that
But sometimes they don't.
The application fee, well, and Janine explains it to them. Application fee is an application fee. The escrow is a charge, and there will be charges in addition to the escrow amount. So there could be charges.
Well, that's why we want this disclaimer. So
these are good ideas. These are good ideas, but I don't think you have to worry about if you do this, you will, you will. And I assure you, I'm sure Paul and Frank and I do charge the lowest possible number for residents, but because we don't bill that much, we don't spend that much time on them if they're minor matters. But you do, it is important that you understand that that is the only review that takes place, and that is the written resolution that takes place. So that is the record you need to create to even have a good record to have a lawfully granted variance.
No, I understand.
So it's very important to get this right. So I like your
understand.
idea. I like your idea of a number that works. Telling the applicant, reminding them that it's an escrow that is not a cap is a good idea. But I think people know it. So.
And I don't think there's any reason to set an escrow lower than what we think it's going to cost for them to do a simple application in a single meeting.
Right.
That's probably right. That's right. But I don't think it's all as easy as, just looking at other towns, Rich, because other towns probably have various types of application numbers as well. You can see you can have a high application fee and pay some costs outside the escrows. I'm not suggesting you do that. I think what you do is fine, but
seems to me the more realistic the amount is, the better chance it is that resident is going to get something back.
They might get $100 to $100 back, and that makes them happy versus angry because they now feel that they've got to come up with something new. And I agree with you, Tom. I mean, the average person with an attorney will certainly know that if it's an experienced land use attorney. But a resident that comes in without an attorney, maybe just an engineer to do some site work or whatever, they may not know that. They don't understand that. And we've had a couple in the last few months that were unhappy. and they didn't understand that. So we're trying to make that a little more transparent so that doesn't happen. We want our residents to be happy. We want them to, do their improvements. It's certainly a benefit to the community. It's a benefit to the homeowner. So I think that's our ultimate goal. And I think the suggestions we're making are good ones. I think the committee worked hard at reviewing all the paperwork that was given to us. And so we just want to reduce it now to paper and pass it along.
Now, just so you know, Carol, that gets done by an amendment to the ordinance and an amendment probably to the application form and the completeness checklist.
Correct.
So Paul will work with Janine and maybe me and John
Yes.
Bellardo or whoever
Yes.
to
Correct.
put it into an ordinance form, and then that
Correct.
requires the township committee to introduce it, the referral to the planning board for consistency review, which it will be consistent.
Right.
And then the adoption at a governing
Right.
body meeting. So it takes a while.
I know it does. And that's why we wanted to get it done as quickly as we can so we can pass it along. So if anybody has any more questions, the board, be happy to answer what I can. And that's what we're going to do next. And I thank my committee and for their work and the review. And so that's what we'll do. We'll put it on paper and give it to the township committee. Anybody else? Okay, seeing no one, we will see what we got on our agenda here. Any more board comments for anything that you might have to say?
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas,
Seeing
everyone.
none?
Happy holidays.
Same.
Take good care,
Okay.
everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Everybody.
Merry
Happy
Christmas,
holidays.
Happy New Year.
Everybody have a good season.
Oh, we have one more thing we have to do with Paul. He has B&D Associates. You want to talk about that, Paul?
Yeah, I just spoke about that briefly before. They are still
Oh.
incomplete, but I spoke with the attorney today, and
Uh-huh.
he understands what he needs to resubmit in order to be able to deem complete. I think that's going to be coming up relatively soon.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll have our reorg on the 7th and we'll
Carol?
continue with our master. Yes?
There is a, it says, I don't know if this is tonight, but it's on our agenda, it does say something about executive sessions.
Yeah, I know. I see that. I see that. I'm just going over timing with
Okay.
our meetings. We do have our reorg on the 7th and we've got to put our master plan revision on that meeting as well. And we're still going to leave open for the January 14th meeting, Leamington Farms. I do see down here, I guess Janine snuck this in on me, executive session. Janine, what did you have in mind?
That says the 2020 professional contract proposals. Oh, yeah, do we have to discuss that now? I have them. Or is that discussed at the January meeting when we vote?
Yes, that's correct. We do have our professionals at our reorg meeting that we will approve their contracts. So if any board member wants to see them, you can speak to Janine. She has copies of them and renewals.
Proposals that came in, there was 2 different attorneys, 2 different engineers, and 2 different planners. So we send it over to you. You can see what our hourly rates, what was requested versus what we paid and what the other ones have. But I didn't know if we reviewed this tonight or if it just gets reviewed on the night when we make the decision to the resolution.
In the past, we've done it the night of the reorg. Like I said, if any board member wants to see the contracts before our reorg, you certainly can speak to Janine about that.
I'll send you the little spreadsheet that I have that has professional services, just so you can see the other comparisons. Because the resolution is technically already written up. So obviously you appropriate.
Okay, I think that's a good idea, Janine, and thank you. Thank you
So-
for the work.
I'm assuming there's no Betty Merck dinner for the township reorg this year. Does anybody know what the particulars are?
It'd be a Zoom, I believe, right?
Mayor, you want to speak to about that?
Yeah, so there's no Betty Merck dinner. We will, I'm not canceling it. And my plan is that we will eventually later in the year have a Betty Merck dinner. It won't coincide with reorg.
Mayor, could you get away from the microphone a little bit? You're very muffled. We can't hear you. Move back a little.
Can you hear me?
Too muffled. You're too muffled.
How about now?
A little better. Go back a little more.
How about
Better make sure there's not a cliff behind you,
Is
Larry.
there a clip back there? Yeah.
No, no cliff, Larry, I promise. I'm watching. Okay, try it now.
So there's no Betty Merck dinner. COVID and the restrictions imposed by the governor and just common sense right now with the way things are, everything is ticking up. I can certainly tell you that during the summer months, we were seeing COVID cases coming in once a week, sometimes going 2 weeks without any cases. And I will tell you, almost every day I am getting reports from the county, 2, 3, 4 cases a day. So it's certainly from the confirmed numbers being reported, there is an uptick even here in Bedminster. And frankly, with the cold weather, there's just no venue that presented itself to do a Betty Merck dinner or even an informal get together for wine and beer and cheese and crackers. The only thing that I could really think of was the fire department. And after the numbers kept getting worse, that was not a feasible alternative either. So we're doing the reorg as Zoom. As I think most of you, if not all of you know, that Judy Sullivan will not be, well, she will be retiring in April. Her last official day is May 1, but she will be taking her vacation. So really her last work day is probably going to be the end of March. One idea that I've been talking about is perhaps doing, if COVID allows it, to do a Betty Merck dinner and a thank you to Judy sometime in March. So we'll try to get that going, but a lot depends on how we all, how we all do with the virus.
Okay. So the meeting is on the Monday as a township meeting, Zoom. And that's January 4th, I believe.
Correct.
Okay. So everybody join in. I hope you sign up for Zoom so you can be there. Support our town.
They'll get the link from the town, I guess, some week before or whatever.
Those of us with terms that expire at the first of the year, I'm assuming will be renominated or reappointed.
I don't need.
There are,
I'm just, is the writing on the wall here or what?
no, that was a smart. There's actually 4 of you that will need to be reappointed. I am assuming that Larry will do so or discuss with you. And then at our meeting, either Larry or Tom can swear you in on January 7th.
Yeah, Janine was going to disconnect anyone a few minutes ago who wasn't.
Yeah, just so you.
So everyone stayed on, right?
Yeah.
Did anyone disconnected?
They're all good to
right.
reappointed.
That was your message, Scott.
Oh.
Jeez.
Very hard-headed.
Oh. Thank you, Rich. If you are on this call, you are being renominated. As Carol had said, this board kicks ass. I'm not.
Carol said, this is a very good board. It's great to work with. Everybody's very dedicated. And I do hope anybody that is up for renewal will want to continue. And that's up to the mayor, but I hope we stay together. Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Seconded.
Good night, have a good holiday, and we'll see you next year.
Good night, everybody.
Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you next year.
Yep, good night.
Good night.